This morning, I have with me Perry Johnson, a former presidential candidate. I'm going to be talking with him about what's going on with the GOP, with Donald Trump, with the U.S. economy. Perry Johnson, thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Well, delighted to be here.
So I know you probably read the news as much as I do. It feels like the United States is being overrun by people from other countries. They're here by invitation or by the fact that we won't reject them. However, President Biden is now saying the border crisis is Donald Trump's fault. Now, you've run for president. You know the sneaky stuff the media does and the hit pieces. What, in your estimation, what's going on here? Is this Biden trying to tell a lie so often and with the backing of the media that he hopes it becomes true in people's minds? What are your thoughts?
Well, we know for a fact that you have just a record number of people crossing the border illegally, and it's been under the Biden administration. What's more, when they cross the border, they're not even sending them back. Everybody knows that. And then we see that we've set a record, literally a record, for what, 3.5 million people crossing the border in the period of a year illegally? This is so absurd. So what do you do? This is what Germany did. You know, during World War II, you had Hitler over there who kept this propaganda. He had this propaganda expert that was probably the best in the world. And they kept telling people all these things. They would have movies talking about how evil the Jews were, and they'd have pictures of rats. And then they'd have the rats all around in the movie theater, and they try to make them analogous to Jews, so they got people hating the Jews. Well, if you have a propagandist like that, it's similar to what Biden's doing. And Biden goes over there literally telling people about the border crisis that he engendered by refusing to send the people back. What's more, keep in mind, he was so adamant about not finishing the wall, a wall that was started by Trump, that we knew obviously would have a negative impact on people crossing the border. We're not saying that putting a wall stops all crossings, but it certainly makes it much more difficult. Instead, they go out of their way to try to ease the problem of people crossing the border. In fact, they had rules put in place that if somebody claimed that they were a transgender or going for surgery, they could automatically get across without anything. And then they do not even let the people on the border enforce the laws. So what are you going to do when they see that this creates huge problems? Not only is it an extraordinary expense to all the Americans here, but as a result of that, it makes the drug trafficking now a very easy path, because the cartels now are loving, because they can send people over at will and have them just distribute these drugs. And we see the damage that fentanyl is having. Fentanyl is killing our young people. It's affecting people all across this country. And I think you can go to most any state, and they're very concerned about the fact that we have these illegals entering. Now, let me give you an example of what happens even here in the state of Michigan. We had a group of people that were entering this country that decided to have a robbery ring. And so they literally started robbing houses all over, starting with the wealthy areas in this state, systematically going out and seeing what they could take. And now suddenly, out of nowhere, you end up having thefts taking place where they never took place before, all because this is a group of foreign players, activists that are out there seeing what they can do to get money from people here by stealing and literally robbing. So when we talk about the problems, these problems are enormous. Now, what they did was decide that, okay, we're going to have a border bill, but to do that, we're going to couple that with something that the Republicans just aren't going to countenance. So let's do that. Let us have a bill, and with this bill, let's put something on that bill that the Republicans just can't accept. And the only way we're going to pass it is if we couple them together. Now, there's no question the Republicans would be gung-ho if we can put a bill that is aimed at one main theme, stopping the illegal immigration. And if we have that in the bill, and that's the bill that they want, believe me, I don't think you'd have a single Republican that wouldn't be gun-ho for that, jumping up and down saying, finally, we're getting something done. But that's not what they do.
Yeah, they've injected this poison pill of, well, we need to give 60 billion of the 118 billion to Ukraine, but we don't want any accountability. You can't ask where it goes. According to the media, only like 30% of the weapons and money are actually making it to the war. The rest is being stolen or embezzled or ending up on the black market, being sold to Iran and other countries. So this is why Republicans, they're not against Ukraine, but they're against the lack of accountability. But that's exactly what the Democrats want. They don't want accountability. They don't want a light being shown on that. And it's amazing to me that this immigration issue now, according to the most recent data coming out, it's going to cost $500 billion a year in order to take care of these asylum seekers that have come into the country. And most of them, 90%, don't even really have an asylum problem, but $500 billion. And we wonder why inflation continues to be a struggle. I mean, that's 5 Russia-Ukraine wars every single year just to house people that shouldn't be in the country in the first place.
You hit the nail on the head. And what they want to do is to find a way to make themselves look good. And the way to do that is to just name it something else. Remember anti-inflation? The anti-inflation bill that did nothing but cause inflation. It's incredible the way that they worked it. What about in Michigan, you had a bill that was passed, secure elections. And what that meant was that you no longer had to give any identification, that anybody can vote without any ID. That was secure elections. So what they do is just name it the opposite of what it really does and use that as a promotional tool. It's actually kind of clever if you think about it.
Yeah, they just have to inflation reduction, inflation reduction, inflation reduction, and it does the exact opposite. But they get to say it over and over and over again. Every talking head in the media says inflation reduction, and we start to think, oh my gosh, things are going to become more affordable, and yet they continue to go up, up, up. So I think you're on to something there. That they've got a great marketing department. Another thing I wanted to get your insight on is President Joe Biden is saying the biggest reason Donald Trump is a threat to the country is that if he were to get back in office, he would undo all of my policies. But isn't that exactly what Joe Biden did? Reverse all the Trump policies to get back at Trump. And now it's created issue after issue after issue.
You nailed it. That's exactly right. And what policy? Policy of just letting people cross the border at will? Policy of letting people that want to trade drugs come on in? Policy of doesn't matter, we don't need any rules, let's just let anybody cross that border. I can't believe that the average American thinks it's reasonable to have millions of illegals entering the country at will just because we don't want to have a border. It is so absurd. And then we're going to spend all this money to house them and take care of them. This is the most absurd of the absurd. But that's what Biden wants to do. And Biden has all these expenditures. Understand now, we are $34 trillion in debt. When I started running for office, I was using the number 32, and I was exaggerating because we were only 31.5 trillion. Now we're up to $34 trillion in debt. And for the first time in history, we're actually spending more on the interest on our debt than we do on national defense. Now, to have a situation like this is absurd, and it is not sustainable. You even had comments that were made by major people in the scene. I think Jamie Dimon made the comment. By the way, he's a Democrat. He had made the comment that once we get to 130% of gross domestic product, that's our debt, we're in trouble. Well, we're hovering around that now.
Yeah.
Because we're sitting there with a $27 trillion economy. I think we're at 27.3. And we are now literally $34 trillion in debt, and it's rising. It's not stopping, it's rising. I believe in the very next election that we have after this, the number one issue that everyone will be talking about will be the national debt, because we cannot afford to sustain it. We're paying interest on this debt. Now, you have economists that actually make comments that our debt is meaningless. This is stupid. It is not meaningless. We have to pay interest on this debt. And, people aren't going to loan us money unless we do pay interest on this debt. And people aren't going to loan us money if they don't think we're going to pay it back. So obviously, the credibility of our entire country depends on the credibility of the U.S. government to pay back the debt and pay the interest. So right now, the amount we're paying in interest is stratospheric, and it has never been at this level. Yeah. By the way, this idea of sending whatever 60, 100 billion over to the Ukraine without any accountability is so stupid. How many dollars are really going to oligarchs? And the fact that they don't want to have any accountability of this money is scary to me. Yeah. It makes me think, what kind of people do we have in Washington? Or do we have people that are really interested in the best interest of our country? Do we have honest people? I often wonder, how is it possible that someone making the salary that they have, what is it, $176,000 a year, can accumulate $100 million when their whole job has been nothing more than being a congressman or senator? Yeah. That to me is amazing. I don't care how good you are at saving. You can't get $100 million.
Yeah, that's a political math that I haven't quite figured out. I mean, you have created and built from the ground up many successful businesses. You've lived the American dream. If you ran your businesses the way the U.S. government ran their money and their business,
bankrupt.
Is there any bank in the world that would give you a loan?
No. Not only that, I'd be under. I couldn't survive. Yeah. In fact, no business could survive. And you can't run businesses that way and make it. But then again, it isn't very often that you actually have a businessman that ends up running the country. It's very rare. Trump was probably the first businessman in a long time. You probably have to go back many, many years before you actually have a businessman who ran the country. And Trump did a really phenomenal job in so many ways. Even Jamie Dimon commented on some of the great things that he had done. And he's not a Trump advocate, but you have to admit that when you take a look at spurring the economy and paying attention to things that are really important, we were pretty secure. We did not have all these world problems. We have the leader of the free world who frankly is suffering from certain issues. Namely, he can't remember where he is often. I feel sorry for him. I'm not going to sit there and beat him up. I do feel sorry. I know he had a couple of aneurysms that probably affected him. And I know that it does affect a lot of things that he does and says. But nevertheless, I'm sitting over here wanting to make sure that this country is secure and that the world is secure. And as the leader of the free world, it doesn't set a really sound example. And look at all the problems. We had 3 people killed recently. And why? Iran. We have a problem going on with the Ukraine war. We have a problem in the Middle East, and we have strife that we haven't seen in some time. And so when you all look at the world order, you say to yourself, what's going on? And that doesn't even take into account the problems that we have here in this country. And one of the biggest issues we have, I think, is the border. Another issue we have is the fact that we have really ignored middle America. This inflation is the biggest tax anyone can have on middle America. Because when you take a look at the average family in the United States, and let's say the median income, I think, in the United States for a family of 4 hovers around the mid-70s. So you have to try to live on that after they take out the taxes and the FICA and the state tax and everything else that they have. And then you say, well, this is what I have to live on. So now what I'm spending for food represents a sizable portion of my budget. And to see the prices go up like that is kind of scary. And yet when they look at the numbers, they like to exclude food, energy, and housing. Now, what else is left? I mean, it's almost nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, they say you can make any story true, just twist the statistics the way you want, right?
Right.
Sir, you wanted to be president of the United States. How dangerous is it that a court is saying a president can no longer have immunity from the decisions that he or she makes? Is this something that you think will stick and move forward with all future presidents, or is this really just to get Donald Trump?
Everything has been just to get Donald Trump. I want you just to do a little reflection. When has there ever been a president of the United States that has been picked on as much as Donald Trump? From the moment he got into office, they started talking about Russian collusion, didn't they? For 2 solid years, we know that they spied on his camp, and it was okay. They said it's okay for Obama to spy on his camp. Heck, remember with Watergate, Watergate was nothing compared to the stuff that has happened. They had, under their own admission, people that perjured themselves in the Russian collusion effort. And they insisted on all of this going on. And 2 years later, we find out it was all a fraud. What about the fact that we knew that there was information on all of these emails from Hillary, and nothing was said? Nothing was done until after the fact. And they never even did get these emails, you'll notice.
Yeah.
What about the laptop? That's a Hunter Biden laptop. That was another thing that they kept quiet. And here we have the Hunter Biden laptop, another clandestine operation, because they wanted to keep that quiet too. So we have a situation where you have a very biased media, and they go along with it, and nothing was ever really said about the fact that we have all of this craziness going on and all this illegal stuff going on the part of the Democrats. But who gets condemned? The Republicans. And, you know, they go out of their way to pick on Trump, and the poor guy now has, what, 92 indictments or something like that.
700 years in jail is what they say.
It's absurd. It's totally absurd. So I can't envision they're going to prosecute all these presidents for anything that they considered that would be bad. I mean, every time they made a bad decision, they're going to prosecute them.
Yeah.
We'd have all of our presidents being lined up because the courts would have to take their time going after each president for a bad decision that was made.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, gosh. Most people with common sense see that Donald Trump will be the Republican presidential nominee. But will he actually get there? He has so many different lawsuits. I think of it as lawfare. This is warfare through the law. They're trying to bankrupt him. $50 million in legal fees. Right now, as we speak, the Supreme Court is hearing oral arguments about whether he should be kicked off of Colorado. And then Maine is going to follow, and then California might jump in. And I mean, it just are they just never going to stop until he drops out?
I don't think they're ever going to stop. But you know, one thing about Trump, you must admit he's a fighter. That's one of the things that I love about him. You know, he's a guy that is going to stand up and he will fight. And we're talking about somebody that is tough, and it would take somebody as tough as he is to be able to withstand all that. But that's the kind of president I want. I want somebody up there who is tough, because that is really the key. That's what we're lacking right now. We don't have that. Do you really think that we'd have all these problems internationally if Trump were president?
I do not. Yeah. Okay. Final question. I appreciate you coming on. I know how busy you are. You've run companies, you know, like you mentioned, middle America is really being hit, lower income families really being hit. The CEO of McDonald's said that most of his people can withstand the price hikes And so in some areas of the country, they've raised a combo meal to $18. And now they're getting all this backlash for $18 combo meals. When before COVID, a combo meal was around $9 or $10. How can people deal with a almost 100% increase in the cost of eating out at a basic fast food restaurant?
Actually, they can't. And talk to middle America. That's why I believe Donald Trump is going to win this election. Because the heart of America, the middle America, is the one that is suffering. You know, people that have money, we haven't been suffering. But people that are really the backbone of our country, the whole backbone of what has made America what it is today, they're the ones that are really hurting. And they're going to come out and they're going to vote their pocketbook. They have to ask themselves, are they better off today than they were under Trump? And you're going to find that you're going to have a vast majority of people saying no. And that is what's going to cause us to win this election. And by golly, let's face it, we need to make sure that middle America stays the strength of our country. And the only way that's going to happen is if we can do something to really pay attention to the problems they have. And the answer to that is not another 4 years of Biden.
Yeah, absolutely. Were you better off 4 years ago? Were you safer 4 years ago? I think those two questions are really going to lead people to make the right decision at the voting box. Perry Johnson, thank you so much for coming on. If people want to continue to follow you, should they go to Twitter? Should they go to perryjohnson.com? Should they go to both?
Yeah, just go to either one. perryjohnson.com, go to Twitter. In the meantime, let's go and enjoy life. And let's keep America the greatest country in the world.